Hello, and welcome to the Third Sector podcast. I'm Emily Harle.
And I'm Lucinda Rouse. And this is a bonus episode covering a new piece of research out this week on corporate partnerships. The research in question is the consultancy C&E Advisory's annual Corporate Partnerships Barometer. The findings come from a survey conducted over the summer of 130 corporate and charity respondents. It's unlikely to surprise you to hear that, as in previous years, charities are principally motivated to enter these partnerships to access funding, while corporates do so to strengthen their reputation and their credibility.
And with us today to take us through a few more of the findings is Manny Amadi, the Chief Executive of C&E Advisory. Hello, Manny.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Lucinda. Great to be here.
As Lucinda's indicated, it sounds like the headline findings are fairly consistent with previous years. Has anything about this year's report surprised you?
Yeah, actually, there's one big surprise, I would say, which is that in the last year, there's been, to coin a phrase, headwinds, I guess, in the landscape. So whether that is sort of, what some call kind of the anti or the pushback against ESG, environmental, social and governance type initiatives, so anti-woke and all of those sorts of things, particularly in the US and so on. And of course, challenges to government funding and those sorts of things. So in light of that, it's been really great to see that partnerships between companies and nonprofits remains really very resilient, and also actually that they remain a very effective, I guess, mechanism for driving societal change, so environmental or social.
Yeah, that's very heartening. And last year, a significant portion of your report was dedicated to looking at the sort of likely implications of the EU Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and how companies may alter the way that either they're using their charity partnerships or the evidence that they are requesting from their charity partners in order to ensure that they're fulfilling those requirements. Have you seen any big developments in light of that in terms of what companies might be asking for over the past year? I know that it was only going to be affecting big companies initially.
Yeah, it's really interesting, actually, just how the landscape kind of evolves and changes and the sort of pressures, I guess, that both companies and nonprofits have to operate within. So actually, those regulations in the EU were pushed back and delayed because I think companies were concerned about the weight of regulation, so that sort of pressure receded. And at the same time, and so the kind of implications we were expecting last time didn't materialize quite in the same way, but they haven't gone away. They maybe just have been delayed. But then, of course, at the same time, I think the pressures have sort of come in more from the West, if you like, mostly from the US, and not just the US, of course, other places as well. So there's sort of often turbulence, and it's felt a little turbulent. And if you read the kind of the press and the media and so on, you would get the impression that actually there's been a real big rollback of ESG agenda and how companies are responding, right? So this concept of brand washing and all of those sorts of things. So in that context, it's really encouraging that partnerships, which of course sit within that framework, remain important and have been viable.
And in that vein, there were some really interesting findings this year around the impact of the overseas development aid cuts and the effect that that's having on ESG. Can you talk us through those findings a little bit more?
Yes, so that's another quite significant thing that has happened recently. So USAID, for instance, in the cuts in that, and UK government, European governments, and so on, as governments in a sense lean more into defence rather than into development agenda, and so many charities and non-profits are kind of feeling the pressure, but actually companies also, because they have programs with their charity partners, particularly internationally and so on, that they run. And so when those budgets are cut, that then has an implication for them and their programs. So their programs might be to do with their supply chain, so coffee plantations in the different parts of the world, for instance, or youth programs that they're running, with charities and so on, both developmental and humanitarian and so on. So it's affected mainly charities, but it's affected companies also slightly. And so something like nearly a third of charities reported negative impact, and particularly, of course, charities that deliver services internationally and so on. But companies and charities have sort of stepped up. So they've stepped up more in partnerships. So this is the other thing that kind of adds to the value of partnerships as a way of of solving problems together, companies and non-profits and so on. So that's another point of, I go back to that point I made previously about resilience, right? So it's they've also shown resilience in this regard. And we see also charities actually investing more in partnerships as funding in particular from, say the government sector, for instance, has receded. So they're leaning more into partnerships with companies.
And speaking of resilient partnerships, the most admired partnership has remained the same 3 years running. It's a partnership between Tesco, Cancer Research UK, British Heart Foundation, and Diabetes UK. Why do you think that this specific collaboration has held its title as the most admired partnership over the last 3 years running?
I think probably many reasons. It's obviously a very well thought through and well thought about partnership. So the fit between the partners is, I nearly said profound. It's important, right? It's fundamental, I think, to the success of the partnership. So you've got 4 really very significant charities that have been the largest sort of health charities, and Tesco, the nation's kind of largest grocer, and so on. So they take it very seriously. So there's sort of the strategic linkage between Tesco and Tesco Health and those three charities that you mentioned. So that's one thing. Their commitment over the long term is also important. So this is a strategic partnership, so rather than one that was just about 1 year, it's like a 5-year partnership and so on. And I believe this will be renewed, so it's ongoing. They clearly work very hard to communicate the partnership to different stakeholders, whether that's in store or through other channels and out of store and so on. So that's important. I would say they have an advantage, actually. I would say sort of large partnerships that communicate well, obviously then stick in people's minds, bearing in mind actually that this award is actually unprompted. So we don't say to people, respondents, we don't say to them, here are 10 partnerships or 5 partnerships, which do you most admire? We just say, which is open question. So which partnerships between companies and charities or nonprofits do you most admire? So it's about recall. So therefore, if you're communicating quite a lot, people are likely to kind of recall that. So those are some of the reasons why. I mean, having just one final thing actually on this, Emily, just looking back, because this is, of course, the 6th edition of the report, we've only had, I think, 4 or 5 most admired partnerships. So the first was kind of, one for about 4 or 5 years, and the second for about 3 or 4 years, and so on. So that's how it's gone. So it'll be very interesting next time around to see actually where this multi-sector partnership, a multilateral partnership between Tesco and these 3 charities goes.
And one of your headline findings this year was around AI and the adoption of AI expected to grow across all aspects of cross-sector partnering. That's research, impact reporting, even program delivery, and also how partnerships are selected in the first place. When we spoke last year, you said that the use of AI in partnerships was likely to be an evolution, not a revolution. Are you still taking that line, or has there been a more significant impact over the past 12 months?
Did I say that? I did say that. Sorry, Lucinda, I'm joking. Yeah, that was the kind of expectation, actually. So I'd say it's so interesting in terms of adoption of technology, right? So it has grown significantly, actually. It's not been transformative. So this is me defending my case here. It's not been transformative, but it has been notable for sure. We can't deny that. So last time round, I think something like 11% of corporates were using AI within their partnership, and this time around it's about 50%, right? So that's a pretty significant rise. And for charities also, actually, it's been a rise, although charities are lagging companies actually by quite some margin. So I guess I was part right. So on the corporate side, there's been a kind of significant and rapid growth. On the nonprofit side, it's been more an evolution than revolution, I suppose. And yes, it is interesting. I mean, that's usage this last year. And as you said, it's predicted to grow really very significantly next year. So I can confidently say next year there might be kind of revolution rather than evolution in terms of this.
Well, I mean, it's been so rapidly developing in all quarters,
Exactly.
possibly at a speed that none of us could ever have predicted this time 12 months ago.
Exactly.
But thinking about predictions for the coming year, as you mentioned, with the decline and cuts in overseas aid by governments all around the world, charities and their corporate partners are anticipating partnerships are going to become more important. I think it was 84% of charities are predicting that their corporate partners will become a more significant revenue stream, and likewise about 70% of corporate partners are predicting the significance. Anything else that you would like to throw out there before we speak again in 12 months' time?
I guess three things for the future, some of which you've mentioned. So the first is that the agenda of partnering between companies and charities will continue to be, will become even more important in future. That seems certain. That's the first thing. The second thing is then that investments in those partnerships are likely to grow on both sides. So yes, as you said, Lucinda, charities are likely to invest more, but I think something like 2/3 of companies are predicting that they'll invest more in partnerships going forward. So slightly lower than charities, but still very significant. And that's obviously should be heartening for charities who partner with them. And that investment both in terms of cash, but also resources and different assets and so on. And then yes, the third area that we can sort of predict it pretty confidently would be around the use of AI, exactly as you said, in those sort of partnering considerations. So those are things that I guess if I were someone working in a charity or and so on, thinking about partnerships, I'd be keeping those three things very much in mind. One final thing, actually, just as a bonus, is this growth that we've seen, or evolution of the deepening relationship in terms of the nature of partnerships. So they used to be quite transactional. They used to be just about cash. So now they're much deeper. So the Tesco partnership with Cancer Research UK and Diabetes UK and British Heart Foundation sort of illustrates that sort of sense of a kind of a depth partnership. That concept and that practice will also intensify over the next year.
Is this sort of drive towards a more strategic partnerships likely to be driven by corporates rather than charities?
Yeah, I think that's changed. I think it used to be, actually, for quite a long time, companies almost used to, in our experience, almost complain that they had a really strong appetite. They wanted to bring their competencies in what we describe as sort of problem-solving relationships or partnerships, with which the two parties bring their competencies to bear and then try to solve a problem, whether that's environmental or social or whatever it is. Charities often feared that doing that would sort of dilute the amount of cash they'd get, because, as you say, for them, one of the primary motivations is about actually income generation. But actually, companies were saying, actually, if you do that, cash is you're likely to get more, actually. So it used to be driven by companies, but that's changed as probably because I think charities have now seen quite a lot of evidence, actually, that working with other parties and combining your different assets actually can help you get there further. So if you put the mission at the heart of your collaboration, you're likely to create more value. You solve the thing that you exist to do, and you get money to be able to do that. So I think charities are now increasingly actually driving that as well.
Great. Well, Manny, thank you as ever so much for your insight. It's been really great to have you on.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for making time for this again. It's always great just to talk to you both, and we'll keep an eye on this evolving picture.
We hope you enjoyed our chat with Manny. You can find a link to C&E's Barometer in the show notes to this episode. We'll be back on Friday for our main discussion of the week with Paul Wynyard, the head of policy at the fundraising regulator. But for now, from all of us at Third Sector, thank you so much for listening. Our producer is Navpal.